Um, and there were other cool things along the way too, like bighorn sheep and pikas that live like in the alpine tundra, way, way high up. This picture was taken at 12,000 feet above sea level, which is pretty cool. So even though that wasn't my job, it put me in a really cool place to see all these awesome things. So that was a special experience. And also, I chose this job because there's a lot of new birds out there that I hadn't seen. So I got to see like mountain bluebirds and American dippers, which was pretty cool. Um, at our job, we all had to pick a name for ourselves, a plant or animal that we could find in the area. And I chose my nickname to be Dipper after this bird. So it was a lot of fun watching them feed in the streams. If you're not familiar with American dippers, they're the only fully aquatic songbird in North America. So they love rivers and streams where they dive down and look for little invertebrates on the bottom. So they're a very neat species. But other cool things too, like pine grosbeaks and sooty grouse, like here. Um, and you can see the picture on the left here is me holding a boreal owl. So again, even though my job was just environmental education, I ended up getting looped into a lot of other really cool things. So a birder would come every couple of days to the YMCA to do an educational program with birds. He would set up a mist net, and I would show up and just volunteer and just help out. I'd help pull birds out of the nets and hand it to him, or help band birds. And eventually, later in the season, he started banding owls, and he invited me to come help. So that was a very special experience that I was not expecting at all when I went to Colorado. And so I kept doing these seasonal jobs, and I just loved them so much. And so last summer, summer of last year, I said, okay, I got to keep applying for these. And I ended up getting a job in Maine. So there's a little circle here on this map along coastal Maine, and the tiny little island there in the middle is where I got my job. So I was working with the US Fish and Wildlife Service as a seabird technician at Maine Coastal Islands National Wildlife Refuge. So basically, what that means is they put me on a boat. They sent me 5 miles offshore. They said, good luck. We'll see you in 3 months. Have fun. And I did. I had a blast working with the birds on this island. So this is Matinic Island. This is the view I had outside of my front door. It's just a little island, about a half-mile wide and about a mile or two long. And it was ours to roam. There was nobody else out there, just us and the seabirds. So a little bit about what I was doing there. Terns were our priority. So we got to play with common terns and Arctic terns. These are common terns on the left, the ones I'm holding, and I believe the one on the right is actually also a common tern, but they look almost identical when they're chicks. So things we were doing with the terns, we would put up these little fences. You can see in the background behind me in that one picture that there's this really short black fence. So we would fence in some nests, and every day we would go and measure those chicks. We would measure their wings, and we would measure how heavy they were, and we would put bands on them. So that means that every single day I got to handle baby birds, which was a lot of fun. And we would record what kind of food their parents were bringing and how frequently. We would even capture the adults, which was pretty cool. So we got to set up these cool bow nets. So the picture on the right here is a picture of the trap. We put two little fake eggs in their nest so the real ones don't get damaged. And then we have this big hoop that sits over the nest, and there's a net attached to it, and that net is covered up by that grass right now. And whenever the birds try to sit on their eggs, they hit a tripwire, which flings that net right over them. So that's how we caught the terns. And they're sneaky and they are very smart because some of these birds are old. And by old, I mean 15 or 20 years old. And so they come back and do this every year. and they know what these traps look like. So they're pretty sneaky. You have to outsmart the terns in order to capture them. Um, in fact, we caught one tern that was only 6 months younger than me. Only 6 months younger than me, which is wild. And this is an Arctic tern that we caught on the left here. They have a really beautiful, like blood red bill. Just a really gorgeous bird. So that was so much fun. A little frustrating at times, but an absolute blast to get to handle these birds. But these are not the only species that I got to work with out in Maine. I also got to work with black guillemots. If you've never seen or heard of a black guillemot before, which if you're from Florida, you probably haven't seen one on Florida from Florida itself because they're more of a northern species. But they're in the same family as puffins. They're an alcid, except these are all black with that very obvious white wing. So they love nesting on these rocky shores, these rocky cliffs. If I go back a few pictures, that kind of coastline there is perfect for them. They find big ledges and cracks in the rocks, like the one that this guillemot here is standing above, and they lay 1 to 2 white speckly eggs, like the picture on the right. So what we would do is we would walk the coastline and we would peek under cracks in the rocks and use our flashlights and crawl up under these ledges just to see if we could find eggs. So we found quite a few. We would follow them until they hatched. And then when they hatched, we'd get these guys. The little black ones on the right are what they look like when they are fresh out of the egg. And they are tiny and fluffy and so, so sweet. So we would come back every few days to measure them and put bands on them. But when they're really little and just a little too small for bands, the way that we tell them apart is to paint their toenails. So the oldest bird got painted hot pink, and the second bird got painted hot green. So it was an interesting experience to get to paint birds' toenails. But after a few weeks go by, they get really big, and then they turn into the picture on the left. And they they have big attitudes, even for young birds. So this one on the left was only a few days away from fledging, only a few days away from going out on its own. So there was never a dull moment with the guillemots. They also really love eating a fish called a rock gunnel, which is kind of like an orangey colored fish. And you know what that means is that it would make the guillemot's feces also orangey red. A little gross, but fun nonetheless. And a couple other species I got to work with include the common eider, which is there on the left. That's a female. They nest all over the island, and we keep track of how many chicks are produced and any problems with gull predation. And on the right there is probably my favorite bird from the season, and that is a Leach's storm petrel. These are pelagic species, meaning they live out at sea. They only come to land to nest, and they are nocturnal. And so sometimes they would nest in these little burrows. The openings would only be about that big, just right under our house. And so at night, around 11 o'clock maybe, they would start singing from under our house. So it was a really cool experience to be there and really get to see these seabirds up close. And so after that, I did a little work online over the winter. And when January rolled around, I got a job in Florida. So I moved down to Gainesville up in North Florida, and I got a job working with a company that was doing surveys for crested caracaras. And that was so much fun. And I feel very lucky because I had never even seen a crested caracara before I started this job. But I had a great coworker slash boss who taught me a lot about them. And so this is a scene from one of the places where we did surveys. Oftentimes we would be driving down somewhere to Central Florida where there's a lot of open agricultural areas, and we would look for these guys on the left. So we'd have different survey points where we would show up and search around for the caracaras for a few hours. Um, and we got to see all kinds of fun things. We got to see recently hatched caracaras that were all clumsy and looked all goofy. We also got to see them do weird things like flip cow patties over to look for bugs underneath. So they're a very interesting species, and I feel very lucky to have gotten a chance to work with them. And on the right, bonus points to whoever knows what that is, but that is a burrowing owl burrow. So we got to do a little work with them too. And if you notice in the sand out in front of the hole, that's called the apron, there's a lot of little black speckly things, and those are wings of beetles. They will decorate their nests with all kinds of things like insects or grasses or any other item that they find interesting. So we did a couple burrowing owl surveys. We actually did a snail kite survey too. We did American kestrel surveys, and we also looked for Florida grasshopper sparrows. So a lot of stuff happening in Florida. But while I was there, I got a chance to see quite a bit of the state. We traveled to different places for our surveys. We got to see really cool things like this orchid over here on the left that's native to Florida, and really awesome views of things like barred owls and bobcats. Um, and also, it was just fun getting to know Florida. I'm from Tennessee, and so this was my first time really spending a lot of time in Florida. At one of our sites, we had Bachman sparrows singing all the time around us. And while I was in Gainesville, I got to spend some time there in the natural areas near town, like Payne's Prairie here on the right, where there's bison and wild ponies just roaming through the prairie. So lots of fun stuff can come along with field work, even if it's not part of your job. And I just couldn't leave Florida quite yet when my job ended in July. And so in August, I came back to the Florida Keys. I was hired to be an official counter, one of three official counters at the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. So this is a picture from Big Pine Key. I was in like the Middle Keys. So what we did is we would show up at the state park every day, Curry Hammock State Park. We would stand up on our hawk watching platform and we would just count raptors. All three of us would be scanning the skies in all directions, over the ocean, over the land, over Florida Bay, and we would count all the raptors that came over. Um, at the beginning of the season, we had a lot of swallowtail kites. We ended with 5,000 for the season. In fact, I believe it was 5,106. And there were times when there would just be huge groups of hundreds of swallowtail kites doing the swirling tornado in the air. It was such a special experience. I'd never seen anything like that before. And other times later in the season, we had a lot of sharp-shinned hawks or a lot of kestrels. And one day we had 400 peregrine falcons. Actually, it was 399, and we stayed an extra hour and couldn't get one more peregrine. But more or less 400 in a day, which is really incredible. And there is nowhere else on Earth that has recorded the same amount of peregrine falcons in a single day or in a single season than the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. So that was a pretty special experience. It's a little warm down there, just a little toasty, but so many cool birds like white-crowned pigeons, great white herons, which was pretty neat. And every now and then, really rare things will show up, like we saw a black-faced grassquit, um, and other Caribbean rare birds like smooth-billed anis and Antillean nighthawks are there occasionally, and it was just a really fun place to be. It was a blast. So here's our crew. I'm in the middle, and the two other people on the right are the other hawk watchers, Chris and Gianna. This is the platform where we did our hawk watch. And the person next to me is Magnus. He's 8 years old, and he came up with us for almost a month and got really good at identifying birds. So it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still participate in stuff like this. And then to the far left is a park ranger at this particular park. So that's where we did our work. We would stand up there, look at birds, and talk to all the visitors who wanted to know more about what we were doing. So. And when that job ended in October, the very end of October, I said, I can't quite leave the Keys just yet. I was having too much fun. and I didn't quite want to leave. And so I found out that in town, in Marathon, there was a wild bird rescue and rehab center. And I asked them if I could volunteer, and they said, absolutely. So for the entire month of November, I volunteered at this place. I thought I was just going to be scrubbing poop out of their enclosures, but I ended up doing a lot more than that. They let me help take in injured birds. I even picked up injured birds for them. I helped um, I helped them take blood samples. I helped them like put tubes in to give them water and food, which was really wild. This is me on the left with their owl Quinn. This is their barred owl. Quinn has no vision. It's totally blind. At one point, she probably got hit by a car and she's missing one eye, and the other one has gone blind with age. But she is a very sweet owl. She loves little neck scratches, and I would just feed her food right out of my hand. So that was a highlight for sure. But I would get to do things like help hawks that got injured. This is a broadwing hawk on the right that fell into the ocean and fishermen pulled her out. So we helped her get back to being healthy so she could be released. So it was a lot of fun and a great learning experience, and one that I did not think I would be getting. So that was a bonus. And I still love doing field work, so I'm not ready for a grown-up job yet. And I'm just gonna keep having fun with these little temporary jobs for a while. So this is a picture of a greater sage grouse. And in March, I will be beginning my next job in Nevada, where I will be doing things like watching greater sage grouse do their courtship displays where they fan out their tails and they have these big sacs in their chest that they inflate with air. It looks really funky, and if you haven't seen it before, I definitely recommend looking up a video of their displays. And we'll also be putting collars on them so we can track them where they go and fun stuff like that. So lots of cool opportunities out there. And so that's where I'm going. And so from here on, I just have some information or like some tips, some things I've kind of picked up about that might help with some guidance on your path to becoming an ornithologist or having some kind of ornithology incorporated into your career. So before college, there's a lot of things that you can do just to hone your interests. You don't have to be a pro, and there's no pressure at this point. But there's lots of things that can kind of get you involved in stuff. Um, and one great way is clubs. And congratulations, if you are part of the Florida Young Birders Club, you are doing a great job. That's a great part of it. You get to network with people your age and hear from speakers. So great job, everybody. Double thumbs up. But other local bird clubs, chapters of Audubon societies can be a great way to get involved with projects. And just go bird for fun. If you really like birds, just getting to know them will help you tremendously. And if you want to continue doing ornithology or field ornithology in your future, and just have fun. And like I kind of mentioned before, volunteering with anything that pops up, it can never hurt, and it gets you involved in your community and getting to know birds better. And there's also lots of opportunities for people who are under the age of 18 in terms of camps. So the American Birding Association, or the ABA, has a lot of camps for young birders and all across the country. They have some in Maine, in Colorado, and I believe maybe one recently that's international that they just added. Cornell also has a Young Birders event for a week up in Ithaca, New York. And I did attend that when I was in high school, and I thought it was so much fun. One thing that I remember doing is using their fancy recording equipment. So they had these super big parabolas, you know, the big clear dishes around the microphone that we had the headphones on, and we would hold up these parabolas to record bird sounds, and that was a very neat thing. And so I definitely, if you can, try to look into these sorts of camps or clubs. So I will talk about college real fast. It is your decision whether you think college is the path for you, but I loved it. I certainly loved college and I highly recommend it. And the wonderful thing about college is that there is so much going on and there are so many ways to get involved and learn more and have really neat experiences. Um, so when I started school, when I started college, I of course wanted to be involved with the bird stuff, but I also asked around and helped with other things too, like salamander surveys. So this is a gray-cheeked salamander that we see a lot of in the mountains. There were times that I got to go out um, and play in the woods and flip logs and rocks to go look for salamanders with my friends, and that counted as real experience. I was doing that to help their research. There was another time that I got to go snorkeling at night for giant hellbender salamanders in a river. Like, what kind of opportunity is gonna pop up like that except in college? So it was pretty neat. And there's always cool things for you to hop on board when you're in college. Um, and there's clubs and other kinds of one-time events that you can get involved in. And one thing that I will say is it never hurts to ask. Sometimes these really cool things will come your way, just out of the blue, random, but it never hurts to ask to be part of it too. And that's how I got involved in bird research at school, is just because I asked about it and I expressed interest. So probably one of the best ways that you can really appreciate your college experience is just to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. Also, I remember being kind of stressed about what school I was going to go to or what my degree was going to be. And I'm just going to tell you now, if you're in high school, especially, and kind of trying to figure out this stuff for yourself, don't sweat it too much. It's not going to make or break your career. I used to think that I had to go to Cornell because that's where the Cornell Lab of Ornithology was. But that's not at all necessary for a degree to get you into the path of ornithology. Um, Anything natural sciences is perfect. That could be biology, ecology, evolution, environmental science, natural resource management, even forestry. One of my friends has a degree in plant science, but she is doing field work related to birds the same as I am. And same thing with the school. I think the most important thing is that you like the school itself and that you take advantage of the opportunities that are available there. And so, if you decide to go to school, there's a lot of things that can happen afterwards. And I'll go into each one of these, but you could possibly do graduate school. You could take some time to travel around. You could get a permanent job, or as I like to call them, a grown-up job. Or you can do some seasonal jobs, some temporary jobs like I've been doing. That's my personal favorite, and I'm going to save that one for last. So, if you're interested in grad school, that's awesome. I really want to go to grad school and I plan on it. I plan sometime in the not too distant future to find a program that I want to be part of. But that said, there is no rush. If you want to take some time first to do other things, totally fine. Grad school will still be there. Don't push yourself into it if you're feeling tired and feel like you need a little break from school. That's okay. Probably one of the most important things also when considering grad school, there's a lot of things involved, like the funding for projects and student aid, but also make sure that you talk with your potential advisor. Make sure you get along well and you kind of have a good feeling for the project and for each other. And that's probably gonna create a nice recipe for a very good graduate experience. But I know a lot of people from my graduating class who decided to take maybe a year off before going to a job or going to more graduate school, and just travel in between. And this can look however you want it to look. You can take a month off to go look for birds. You could take a whole year off. It just depends on what goals you're trying to meet. And if you do decide to take time off, there's actually a lot of ways for you to get involved in some really neat things that involve traveling. So I put several bullet points here. These are all websites that are made for people who want to travel. So a lot of these, especially the first three, they offer really unique opportunities to kind of travel with a purpose, I like to call it. For example, this one website called Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. You apply to work on a farm, and they will match you with a host. You get food and rent, so you get to stay at that place for free, and get free food in exchange for working on their farm. And you can go live practically anywhere in the world. So that way, you have a host and you have a place to stay, somebody to help kind of guide you in a new country, in exchange for a really great learning experience. Um, and there's lots of other jobs like that. These last two, um, like we work remotely, they offer jobs in things like design and programming and marketing. So that way you can make a little bit of money if you want to be traveling somewhere. So these are all online jobs. Um, so that way you can kind of go where you want and still make money if that's what you are trying to do. And next is the grown-up jobs. Grown-up jobs are great, and there's a lot of perks to grown-up jobs. But just know that if you feel like you're not ready for one yet, that you don't have to jump into it. Or if you are ready for one, go for it. Um, I will say that volunteering, going to school, or trying out temporary jobs can be very helpful if you're trying to figure out what path you're going to go down for a permanent job. So, for example, I thought I really, really wanted to work at a state agency. But while I've been doing my seasonal jobs, I've decided that maybe that's not where I want to go with my career. So it's kind of helping me decide what I want to do. So no rush on the permanent job. Um, if that's kind of the way you want to go. And this is where I do recommend college because a bachelor's degree can kind of help you secure a grown-up job. And a master's degree can help you even get higher pay or some other like a different position than you would have without any higher education. So that is something I'll throw in there. Not necessary, but in certain circumstances, like especially if you want a research career, they might expect you to have a master's degree or higher, like a PhD. But I imagine that if you all are in middle school and high school, you got some time. So don't worry about the permanent job stuff just yet. But my favorite part, yay, is the seasonal jobs. This part is so much fun. At least I've had a really great time with it. And there's a lot of perks to having a seasonal job. I have gotten to travel. So like I've listed already, earlier, I talked about my jobs in North Carolina, in Maine, in Florida, in Colorado. Now I'm going to Nevada. I've also worked in Virginia. So it's just a great way to have somebody pay you to go somewhere else to work. And one of the reasons I really, really wanted to do seasonal work was to keep working on skills. Um, I felt like I had a really great start in college, but there were more things I wanted to learn. And it seems like every job I do, I'm learning more things. I'm learning how to use different types of traps, or like my next job, I'll be learning how to use radio telemetry to track down birds, which is pretty cool. So there's no limit to how many jobs you can have or how many skills you want to keep working on. So this can be a great way to kind of narrow down what skills you want to get better at. And you get to just kind of explore, and it's fun. I just look online on some of the job boards and see what's out there and put my name in for the things I'm most excited for, and I can take you to some really cool places. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it also helps. Well, it can help. It's helping me to sort of figure out what I want to be doing for my career, where I want to go. Do I want to work on a specific species? Is it an ecosystem or a region that I care about most? Is it this kind of agency or this organization that I really appreciate working for? So it can just be helpful, and it can be a low pressure time to sort of figure out these things for yourself. So I have a few tips here for seasonal jobs. And again, this is my favorite, and I have the most experience here, so I'll focus on this more than the others. There are a number of job boards that I have found so very helpful while looking for these experiences. My favorite is called Ornithology Exchange, and I can send these out too, so you all have all this information. But my favorite is Ornithology Exchange, and it is a website only for birds. They have permanent jobs, they have seasonal jobs, volunteer positions, and educational positions like master's programs, all related to birds. And I have gotten several of my jobs from this job board. So I recommend taking a look if you feel like you want to pursue seasonal fieldwork with birds, because it's a pretty great place to start. Texas A&M Natural Resources Job Board is also a good place to look. They're a little bit broader, so that includes other things like maybe forestry or resource management or some marine science. So it's a little broader, not just birds. That also tends to have more education positions than Ornithology Exchange. There's also American Conservation Experience, Student Conservation Association, and Southwest Conservation Corps. All great websites, and I highly recommend looking into them. And I will say that with a lot of these jobs, particularly on Ornithology Exchange and Texas A&M, they do generally prefer people with at least a bachelor's degree or somebody working to get their bachelor's degree. But there are still plenty of opportunities in all these websites for people with any level of degree, even if you're still in high school. So if you're interested in this, I really urge you guys to just kind of take a look at these websites. But there have also been times where I saw a really cool organization and I really wanted to work or volunteer with them. Sometimes if you search their website, they have opportunities posted there for jobs or volunteering. So just going straight to the place you want to work and digging in a little bit more can actually kind of point you in the right direction. And they'll have job offerings or job postings directly on their website. And the really fun thing about seasonal jobs is that once you do them for so long, they kind of just keep popping up. Like people will recommend you or they'll point you in the right direction to get another job. So after a while, they just sort of kind of like fall in your lap a little bit. But it never hurts to ask either. Ask teachers if they have any recommendations or know of anything. Sometimes your friends end up being a good resource. One of my friends is starting graduate school pretty soon, and he asked me if I was interested in doing field work for him. So you never know what might pop up. Same thing, like coworkers asking what they recommend, if they've had other cool seasonal jobs in the past. And this is another reason why it never hurts to get involved in stuff, because the more connections you make, the easier it might be one day to get some neat opportunity. Maybe one that you never would have heard about otherwise. So there are a few considerations that I'll tell you about regarding seasonal work, just a few things that I've kind of figured out along the way. First off, there are so many ways you can get involved in seasonal work. It doesn't just have to be tracking down birds. Now, if that's what you like, then great, you're in the right place. So it can involve conservation, and not just conservation of birds. Again, it could be anything, any kind of wildlife or natural system. There's resource management. There's a lot of jobs for fire and burns, if that's something you're interested in. There's all kinds of opportunities for environmental education. And oftentimes there are jobs for consulting too. So consulting, you usually work for a company and you get paid to do surveys at a location. There's sometimes different reasons for why people hire consultants, but mostly so that way the client knows what kind of wildlife is on that property. So you're pretty much just paid to do surveys. Um, so a couple things to think of. A lot of these short-term jobs will offer housing. I've had jobs for 3 months. I've had jobs for 6 months, a couple for just 1 month. But just beware when you're reading about these jobs to make sure whether or not they offer housing, because sometimes they don't. And so you'll have to decide whether or not that's okay with you. But just make sure, because sometimes they don't mention it, and it's good to ask, good to check before you commit, before you jump all in. And also, the pay varies widely with these jobs. So different. And it depends on what kind of agency you're working for, what kind of job you're doing, your experience level. Sometimes it's an internship and you get paid a stipend. Sometimes you're a consultant and the client is able to pay a pretty high hourly rate. So it just varies. But I would say if you're in a good position to not worry about the amount you're making for a couple months, then I wouldn't fret too much over the pay. I have had some lower paying jobs and they've ended up being some of my favorite field experiences. So again, it's going to vary based on everybody's experiences and everybody's positions. But if you're able to take some time, even in a lower paying job, it can really pay off down the line. And there's so many people who post seasonal jobs. There's state agencies, there's federal agencies, there's nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, and all kinds of things in between. So you might end up kind of falling into one of these categories and finding out that you really like it. So this is a great way to kind of test the waters and see what you like. Also, time of year. This is something I didn't realize until I started applying for jobs. When you're applying for spring and summer jobs, usually starting around April and May, there's tons of jobs out there, tons of jobs. If you're looking for jobs starting kind of in the fall and over the winter, that's a little harder to find. There are much fewer jobs. So just beware if you're planning to do work throughout the whole year, like I've been trying to do, that it might be harder to find winter jobs, especially if you're just getting started with seasonal work. But that's okay. So it's just something to work into the plans. Also, if you're looking for summer jobs, start looking a couple months ahead of time, because that's usually when they're posted. And another thing with these jobs and these job boards is that there are a lot of people out there who are applying for these same jobs as you. And it can get discouraging when you keep getting a lot of no's. I've been told no a lot, and I apply for a lot of jobs each season. But it's okay, and don't be discouraged, because it just depends on the person who's doing the hiring or the type of skill that they were hoping for the most, even though you're a very qualified candidate. So don't let that get you down. If you really want to do field work, just keep applying for stuff, and something will pan out. And so I'm just going to chat real fast about some of the things that you can get involved with in Florida, because there's so much cool seasonal stuff in Florida. Like a lot. Florida has a lot of opportunities. So you are in a great state for getting involved in bird and wildlife jobs. There's a lot of work having to do with wading birds and shorebirds. One of my friends just got a job driving airboats through the Everglades to survey wading birds, which is pretty cool. So you never know, you might land a cool job like that, getting to drive airboats. The University of Florida hires people every now and then to do surveys. I see them sometimes on Ornithology Exchange posting jobs that has to do with snail kites or wading birds or something else. So they usually have several projects going. You can apply for state parks. There are tons of state parks in Florida. There's also 3 federal parks, 3 national parks in Florida, all in South Florida. There might be fewer jobs available there, but you never know. Talking with some people there might lead you in the right direction. There's the Florida Fish and Wildlife Agency that often has seasonal jobs. And sometimes the wildlife refuges too, like St. Mark's often post jobs on Ornithology Exchange. So it can be good to check there. And of course, I've talked about the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. They usually hire about 3 counters every year. So they're always looking for people. And if you go down the consulting route, you might end up doing studies on raptors like I did, working with Florida scrub jays, grasshopper sparrows, all kinds of cool things. So a lot of stuff going on with Florida. And above all, I can't stress enough that it is so important to volunteer. And please, please, please don't think that volunteer opportunities are not as valuable as jobs you get paid for, because they are. Just because you don't get paid for it doesn't mean it's not a good skill that you've learned. And you never know how volunteering might get you that skill to apply to the job, or kind of get your foot in the door, or get you that opportunity to talk to the right person. And volunteering is also a great way to kind of sample different job routes. It's just as good as a seasonal job in that regard. And if you do find yourself struggling to find a seasonal job, especially to fill out the whole year, which can be tough, volunteering is a great way to spend that off season. So if you have a place to crash, maybe if you get to stay at your parents' over the winter, go find a park where you can volunteer, or go make your own project up. It never hurts to start your own project. I've started several myself, and it really worked out. And if you do volunteer, make sure you record what you're doing. Document it so that can go on your resume as a skill. It never hurts to document what you're doing in any situation, just to have it for down the road. And one example of volunteering that I did is I became a county coordinator for the Tennessee Bluebird Society when I was in high school. I just really wanted to get more involved in something bigger in my state. And they said, hey, you want to be a coordinator? That sounds great to us. And so they brought me on as a coordinator, and I got to do my own project at a local park. Like I built birdhouses, and I would go check bluebird boxes every few days, and I would record the number of eggs there were and how many hatched and how many fledged. And I ended up using this as part of my project for the American Birding Association's Young Bird of the Year contest, which is now called the mentorship program. And so you never know how this stuff is going to end up kind of turning in a really great positive direction, and helping birds along the way too. So I have had an absolute blast doing field work, and I hope that all of you who are pursuing jobs related to birds also have a fun time in your search, because that really is one of the best parts. You're at a great time of your life where you can just have fun with it. And that is probably the biggest thing I can leave you with, is just have fun. Just have fun. This is a great, great time for you to just be enjoying the cool things coming your way. So just have fun with it. So, and that's it. And I am happy to take questions.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much. That was a fantastic presentation. If any of the young birders in attendance today have any questions, you can just type them right in the chat box for us, and we'll answer them for you. Or Adriana will answer them for you. I know I have a couple questions for you that I was writing down during your presentation, but I was wondering what you specifically studied at App State, and also like what led you to that school specifically.
Yeah, so I'm in East Tennessee. App State is
Yeah.
in Western North Carolina. So different states, but they really weren't that far apart. It was only like an hour and a half. So it was close enough that if I wanted to, I could drive home on the weekend, visit my family, but it was far enough away that it was kind of like a new place. It was a new town for me to explore.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I loved about App State is when I went for a campus visit, the people there were just so nice, and I really felt at home, and I just felt very comfortable with the facilities that were offered and the programs that were offered, and it just kind of felt like it clicked. Um, so that was one reason why I enjoyed it. And for all of you looking for colleges, go visit your college. It's very important. You might find that you don't like it at all when you get there. So go visit your college if you can. Um, but I did look into the biology department a little bit before I started, and I did see that the one professor did work with birds, and I was really excited about that. So I started and got a bachelor's of science degree in biology, and I concentrated in ecology, evolution, and environmental biology. So it is still a basic biology degree, but some of my like extra elective biology classes were more geared towards wildlife and ecology.
Awesome. Let's see. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat right now. So I have like maybe one more question for you. If you had to pick, I know this is hard, but if you had to pick maybe your favorite seasonal job, what would that have been and why?
Yeah, that is tough. Um, I I think Maine probably has to be my favorite just because
Okay.
some of these birds, like a Leach's storm petrel, like I hadn't even seen before. And I
Yeah.
haven't seen one since. And it was so wild getting to interact with this new species to me. Um, And also, it was kind of a rugged experience. Like, we didn't have running water, we had very limited electricity, we had an outhouse, and we showered out of like plastic bags that we left in the sun all day. Like
Holy cow.
it was not a cozy experience, you know? So it was just the whole experience of living there on this semi-remote island was pretty neat. It was pretty
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
that's awesome. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we can start wrapping up. Well, thank you so much, Adriana, for presenting to us. That was a fantastic talk, and I think a lot of our young birders are going to really benefit from the information you shared with us today. So thank you.
Sure. And I do have one more thing to add. While I was volunteering at the rescue and rehab place in the Keys, um, a chicken got hurt, and they brought the chicken in. It got hurt at the sandal factory, so the people there named it Flip Flop, and they couldn't keep Flip Flop because she's not a native bird. But her leg got hurt, and it's not healed properly. And so I decided that I would take care of Flip Flop, and I brought her home from the Keys. So you never know what might happen when you do a seasonal job. There's always some exciting part that you just don't expect coming. And for me this season, it was a chicken that I brought home. So you never know. All kinds of fun experiences when you do field work.
That is so awesome. Oh my gosh.
I love flip flop.
I do
It's a
too.
great name too. Right.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Have a great weekend to the people that joined us today. Thanks for
Thanks,
coming.
everybody.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Okay.
It's good having you on.
Thank you. Jim, did you want to stay on? He's not on. Thank you. That was really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, that was
And
awesome.
I will make a list, if that's okay with you, of the links that I put on there and send it to you. Do you think that could get distributed to everybody?
Yeah, for sure. That would be awesome. And I apologize about the hacking at the beginning. I just don't even know what was going on with that. That was crazy. So,
That's
That's
good.
okay. It was made for an interesting presentation.
yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
Didn't miss a beat. You're very personal.
Totally
Okay.
Okay.
unexpected.
All right.
Have
Yeah,
a good
thank you
one.
guys so much.
Okay.
I
All right,
enjoyed
Bye.
it.
thank you for coming and doing this. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.